G'day everyone. So today I've come up with the idea of building my very first swim bait. So this is my design. Essentially it's a 110mm swim bait based off an Australian bass. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to go use it out in the ranges to try catch cod with. So the timber I'm going to make this out of is Australian red cedar. This is 30 by 50, which I've just shaped up on and cut out on the bench saw. So absolutely beautiful timber. This timber itself is over 100 years old. I was lucky enough to get some off a builder I worked for once, and yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. And it's nice and buoyant, but not too buoyant, and nice and lightweight, so I can make this decent size lure and not have it be super heavy on me because I don't have massive swim baiting gear or anything. So yeah, I'm gonna cut this guy out and start working on him. And yeah, I'm pretty excited to see how he turns out in the end. So there we go, rough shape out there. It's got a nice bassy profile with that little dip in the head, the big powerful tail. I cut the tail off, but I'm going to make a polycarbonate tail to come off the end here. Alright, I've got to mark out the tops, and so I've just measured everything up here, but I think I'm going to go and sand it all off and start again. Just because I've never done one of these joints before, and I think I made it a bit too sharp. So I'm going to probably drop it about halfway to where it is now, and then I'll cut it from there. Right, there's my angle there, that's much better. Once again, this is going to be quite trial and error just because it is my first bait. So I'm going to actually cut this guy on the bandsaw just because I don't have any small hand saws to cut that, or a jig. Once I create this bait and get my angles right, then I can go on to creating a jig, which I can sit in the vise and cut this with a small saw. So I'll go cut that out. So there you go. Haven't cut it all the way through, I'll do that once the body is shaped. So as you can see, I ended up taking way more off that profile. It was just way too thick in the head, and it was more just like a crankbait shape with a big fat head and a tapered out tail. So now he's got a more of a slender profile, a bit more even, and should give him a bit better swimming action instead of just a big kick and thump in the head. So hopefully that'll help him glide much more through the water. Alright, it's time to get on to cutting out these chamfers. So this whole idea to make this lure for these specific fish is because the eastern cod are under threat, or a threatened species technically, and out in this river where they live, yeah, they'll almost push to the point of extinction in this river, and then they'll protected, and then their numbers are just boomed. And it was before I lived in the area, and a lot of guys would say that river was just full of bass. They never caught any cod, and it was full of bass. And every time that I've gone and fished there, I've lived in this area for around 5 or 6 years, all I've caught is cod. It's just full of cod, and I've never caught a bass, which is really good to see, because their numbers are back, and I know further downstream, guys catch a lot of bass still. So it's a level playing field now, and it's nice to have the fish back. So hearing that, my theory is that these fish have definitely come and eaten the bass. You know, they've got big mouths like this big on them. You know, that's on a small fish. You get like a 5-6 kilo fish and they got a mouth like this. So they can definitely buff down those big bass in the rivers. So the bass had competitors. The cod were back in numbers and put the bass's numbers down. So my theory is that they came and just started eating all the bass. And that's why I'm making this little bass swim bait. So yeah, that's my theory behind it. And yeah, the whole idea of the create and catch is just thinking of stuff like that and then going and trying to replicate something that has actually happened in that environment, or really replicating a specific fish that I know the fish I'm targeting feeds on. So there it is, all sanded down. It's sanded down to 240. It's all nice and symmetrical. I'm quite happy with how it's looking so far. One problem I've run into is the tail is going to be too narrow to put a polycarbonate tail in. So I've left it too narrow. So you can see, to cut a slot in there, like a 4mm slot, and place some polycarbonate sheet in there for the tail. It's just not going to have enough timber on the side, and it's just going to be a weak point, and I am going to be casting around rocks. I don't want to really break it off, so I'm going to just run a screw eye off the back end, have a back treble, and then the front treble just here. And then I'll just tie a nice feather treble off the back, and it should look nice and smick, I reckon. So I'm going to mark out the hook hangers, the lead holes, and I've also got to drill out the eyes and carve on the gill deed. Stencil on the gills to carve them out. So I've just got the holes for the line ties and the hook hangers put in. And now I'm just going to find the appropriate size lead for this bait, and then drill the holes and fill them up. So yeah, and then I'll be able to cut the joint. So there's the joints all cut off. They're not super perfect, but considering it's my first one and I did use a bandsaw, it's not too bad. Now I'm just going to run this guy on the sander and bring him back a couple mil, just down here, to give him a bit more freedom in movement in the tail. So there you go, just sand it back a little bit more, just to give him that bit more freedom of movement, as you can see there. Cool. Now let's get on to drilling these weights in. So what I've decided to do while drilling the holes is I'm going to just do one bigger lead hole up the front here, a bit further up, and then I'll have the hook hanger back a bit. Instead of having a hook hanger here and having two small lead holes there, it's just going to make it too crowded in there and a bit too messy, I think. So I'm going to drill one lead hole a bit further up in the head, and then move the hook hanger back, and then same in the tail. The hook hanger's in the tail here, but then I'll move this lead hole back just a little bit more as well, and just to get it a bit more even. So I'll see how that goes. There you go, there's the first lead hole. There's the second one. Had a bit of a blowout, but I'll just glue him back on and he'll be all good. So these are the two sinkers I'm putting in. Same size for tail and belly. I think they're around 7 grams each maybe. And yeah, once I have all the hardware installed and do a test, and then if it's too heavy, I can just drill some lead out of each hole before I fill them up, just to get that buoyancy and sink rate just where I want it to be. So I'm just going to measure and drill the holes for the joint tires here, the joint connectors. Just got to get them nice and perfect and even. So all I'll do is I'll just use the ruler and measure the same amount on each side. I don't have a pair of calipers at the moment, but they are one of the best tools you can use for this, I'm sure. So all I'll do, if you don't have a pair of calipers, is just sit. Clear some junk out of the way. Just sit your joint along your ruler like that. So it's 30 centimeters. And you can just your pencil. Just mark the center. Half of 15 is 7, so 7.5. And so from the center, I'll come out 7.5 mil. Mark that there. And there. And there we go. We've got 2 even marks. Just like that. Now I'll do the same on the belly here. So this time I just sit the ruler in. Just like that. Mark 15 mil, just halfway. And then mark 7.5 mil out from there on each end. Just like that. Now I'll go get those drilled out. So there we go, there's our even holes from the middle. Now I'm going to get on to making some hardware. Actually, before I get into the hardware, I'm going to fill in those lead holes in the sinkers and then send it all back nice and smooth and seal it, then put all the hardware in. I also got to drill some eye sockets. To fill it in, I'm just going to use some baking soda and super glue. And before you say, yes, I did get this idea off Marlene Bates, so thank you Marlene Bates, because it works incredibly well. So I'll get onto that. So there's the bait so far. It's a bit messy there just from the super glue, but that's going to be okay. It'll all blend in eventually once it's sealed. So that's it for the time being. I'm just going to drill some eye sockets in. Just got some 10mm eye sockets drilled in. There you go, guys. There's the line tie and 2 hook hangers in. The front hook hanger is running through the sinker, just so I have enough room for these 2 joint wires to actually run a good 25mm into the bait to make sure it gets a good grab. I get those guys fitted in. So with the 2 joint wires here, I'm just going to sit them in dry, get them where they need to be, the right length and everything, and then I'll do a weight test. I won't glue them in until after I've actually painted and clear coated the bait, and when it's completely ready and finished, then I'll super glue the holes and then just drop them in and line them up perfectly. That way I don't get any gunk like in the two joints in the connectors, no epoxy, no paint, and it won't hinder the action at all. Just make sure I get a nice clean screw-eye connection there. Also forgot to mention, I've also sealed the bait off camera while I was waiting for the wire to show up in the mail. So the sealer I use at the moment is Feast & Watson, sanding sealer. It's the first time I've ever used it and it's working quite well so far. Just leaves a nice smooth finish, builds up, fills in any grain, which is nice, and it dries in like 20 minutes, half an hour. So I'm pretty happy with it so far. And it doesn't discolour the timber at all or anything, and yeah, leaves a nice smooth plastic finish, so perfect for painting on. Alright, so let's see how this guy behaves in water. There he goes, very tail heavy, isn't he? Very tail heavy. Now to drill some of that weight out of the tail. I think I'll drill some weight out of the tail and put a split ring on his nose and then see how he goes after that. So I drilled some lead out of his tail there. Let's see how he goes now. Still way too tail heavy. It's really pulling him off camber too. Just want him to sit nice and flat like that. Alright, more's got to come out. So I've done a bit of modification. I've put another small ball sinker just here behind the hook hanger, the main weight. And then I put a really small one in the tail again. See, and it seems to be working much better now. A nice even sink, which is what I'm after. So I'm quite happy with the weight distribution in this little bait now. Sink's nice and level, and yeah, I think it should be a good little bait once it's all done. I'm just going to hang it up now, just overnight, and let any water that got into it during testing dry out before I add the extra weight and seal it all over again. Because the next step after that is to paint and finish it, because it's getting pretty close. So let's pick this up again tomorrow. So I've just filled all the holes in again. And now it's time to just give them a nice thick coat of some sealer. Just reseal them up. So all I do is I just dip it in. Just like that. Pull it out. And I'll brush it off. Because it goes on super thick and I just don't need it that thick. So bait's all sealed now. Put 3 extra coats on it. I'm just going to give it a light sand back just to get it real nice and smooth. Then it's time to paint. So it's all sanded back and I'm just putting the 2 pieces in my little paint holders here, and then it's time to go paint them. All these are 2 bits of plywood with some bolts and nuts through them, and then I bolt them onto my little rotator, which you'll see. Just holds them nice in place and makes it a lot easier to paint. So, pretty simple. So I'm going for a pretty natural paint scheme on this one because I want to look pretty representative of Australian bass. You can see they're quite a silvery fish with a lot of gold and bronze and dark green back. Not a whole heap of colour, mainly just green and that bronzy gold that's all through their body and up into their gill rakers and everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down some transparent bright green and then run over the body with some satin gold. I'm also going to add some fluorescent purple in there, not much, because I just really want to add just a little bit of tinge just to the lateral line here, just to kind of define it. I really like to use purple. That's probably my favourite colour to use in lures, and especially this river where I'm going to go fish this lure. Purple always seems to work incredibly well. So I'm going to add a bit of purple, and yeah, should blend in all nice in the end, I hope. So now let's get into it. So there you go, that's the first layer of purple down. Now next step, I'm going to come over with some gold and give some highlights up in the head and all over the body essentially. Not a whole lot. And then after the gold I'll tie it in with some green. So I just realised I've got this pearl copper, which I think I'll use instead of the satin gold, because their goldish colour is more towards copper and bronzy, I guess. And I think I might use this and then come over it very lightly with the satin gold, and it might just give it that little extra bit of pop. So let's get started on this one. There you go, there's the bronze down, it looks quite nice. Once I come over with this green, I reckon it's going to blend in very nicely, especially once I put a scale pattern over it. So next colour is some bright green, transparent bright green, but if you layer it up it gets nice and dark. So there's the green on. You can see I came down quite far and only left that tiny bit of purple at the bottom, which is just all I wanted. And that copper shines through absolutely beautifully. Just gives it that perfect green on copper effect, just like a bass. It's pretty vibrant right now, but I am going to come in and tone it down with some other greens and a bit of black and everything like that. I think I'm thinking about putting some scales on, but I'm not too sure yet. No, it's looking quite good. I'm quite happy with it so far. So I'm just going to do the scales now, and all I'm going to do is just decide which way I want them to go. I think I like them that way a bit better. I'm actually just going to hold these ones on by hand and just put them on the flank here. No need to completely wrap the bait. I'm also going to be using some pearl platinum too. see how that looks. Oh yeah, that looks great. Look at that. That looks beautiful. Nice and subtle. Just what I was after. And then I can fade the top in. Should be all good. So there's the scale pattern. I think I may have forgotten to record, but it looks really nice. Really blends it all in a bit better. So I just came over with the transparent black on the back and blended it down the sides. And it looks really nice here. There you go, if you can see that. And just a little bit of shading around the eyes. But no, it looks beautiful. I'll get on to some gill patterns now. Yeah, got the nice pointy gill raker like on a bass on both sides. Looks really nice. So there you go, I just put some small mouth details on there too. I think I'm going to leave the gills at that, it looks quite nice. Just with everything shining through like that. Pretty happy with it, I don't want to push it too far. So I'll get on to painting the fin on. Sorry, just going to come in with a little bit of green on the gills, changed my mind. So the paint job's done. Last thing I'm going to do is just give it all a really light spray with some satin gold. Just gives it a nice little finishing touch. And there you go, folks. There is the finished paint job. Just time to put the eyes in and then onto the clear coat and she'll be done. So the eyes I'm going to use are just from fish skull, these flyer eyes, and they're pretty well a perfect representation of a bass's eyes. They have really dark red irises around the pupil, and yeah, it's going to look perfect. So I just got it off the lure dryer, which is all dry and the clear coat's all finished. It looks really nice, I'm really happy with how it turned out. The colours turned out nice and natural, just what I was going for, with that little tint of purple on the bottom, bringing all the black on the top and down, and that more natural colour green really helped pull it all together. That looks really nice, I'm really happy with it. There you go, it's a bit of a pain getting it in. The joint's a bit bigger than I wanted, but I mean it's going to have a lot of action. The tail's really nice and free. So I'm really happy with how it's looking. I'm going to tie a feather treble for the back, and then she'll be all ready to fish. So there it is, my very first swim bait, completely finished. Got a nice feather tail on the back here, just with some white and olive marabou, with some green and purple crystal flash. I'm very happy with how it looks. Next thing is to go swim test it. Look at that. Look at all those spots. Look at all that detail in there. Looks so beautiful. Very, very happy with how that's turned out. So I'm super happy with how it looks. For my very first swim bait. You know, I've had my challenges with it, getting the weighting right, because it is only small. Getting the joints in correctly and everything, just a couple of small little things. I've learnt a lot. I'll do some things differently on the next one. Like I'll definitely shape the whole body, get it all centered down perfectly, and then I'll tape some weights to it and find out where that perfect area is for those weights to sit and what's the correct amount of weight to make it perform in the water the way I want it to, instead of just, yep, weight will go there and I'll just figure it out later. And having to drill all that lead out was a bit of a pain in the butt, so I'll do that next time, and yeah, but pretty happy with it. So unfortunately there's not going to be any fishing action in this video. The area where I live has just had a massive downpouring of rain over the last week or two. 400 mil, 500 mils of rain. So this river where these fish are is just going to be flooded out for a really long time. So I'm just going to have to be patient and just bide my time and go fish it when it's nice and safe to fish, and it should be nice and healthy and flowing really well. But I'm really happy with how it swam. Swims really nicely. It doesn't glide like that. I was thinking it might have glided, but it's technically not a glide bait anyway, it's a swim bait. So yeah, it swims really, really nicely with a nice wobble and a nice kick in the tail. Pretty stoked with how it turned out. And I really like how you can stop it. It fully turns around 180 degrees on itself and just sits and looks behind it and then keeps swimming. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked on that. So thanks for watching everyone. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.